decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mandel, here for the next couple hours, talking about all things Winnipeg Jets. It's a very busy weekend. The Jets obviously in action last night in Dallas, dropping a 4-3 decision in overtime. They don't have time to lick their wounds, though, as they're in Nashville tonight to face a very talented Nashville Predators team. Gentlemen, good to see you. It's been a whopping 10 hours since we last got together, yet there's already controversy between Dave and Ezra. Things are getting ugly behind the scenes at Illegal Curve on this Saturday morning. Dave M., as the victim of Ezzy's actions, why don't you describe what went on?
Well, I mean, it's not a huge deal, but I didn't realize that Ginsburg had the run of my house. So when I was busy,
preoccupied,
if you will, preoccupido. Next thing I know, I come outside and come downstairs, and somehow he went into my office, grabbed an old IC toque that I had been saving for my niece for about 10 years, and then somehow it's around his bulbous head, and with his questionable stains, and my niece's pristine toque is now a thing of the past.
Yeah, you just have to.
Well, he never told me that it was for your niece, Dave. If that's the case, I'll take it off.
He never expected you to roam around his house like a vagrant stealing things.
Okay, first of all, I was not roaming the house like a vagrant. I called Dave's name. I came in, about 15 minutes before the show started, and I was yelling Dave's name. Didn't hear anything. The door was unlocked, so obviously, Dave was nice enough to do that for me. Didn't hear anything. I assumed Dave was, taking care of business, as they say. And then I didn't hear anything. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go upstairs and see what's going on. Then I happened to wander in Dave's office, saw a little vintage IC toque, and then just put it on. Didn't think it was a big deal. So there's no controversy. I usually just don't, go upstairs. So anyways.
I'd say the bigger controversy are the coffee rings that are apparently on my table, according to Ezzy.
That's true.
Yeah, my Contipo is dripping. I don't know what's going on. It usually is pretty good, but I cleaned it up. I've got some paper towel here, Dave. It's all good.
Yeah, all right. I trust you.
For those
run on the main floor.
Yeah, for those who are concerned about Ezzy's respecting, if Ezzy respects wood or not, it's a glass table, not a wood table in this instance. So we don't have to deal with that controversy. Dave will, I'm sure, have the Windex out during the first commercial break and both spray down the table and spray down Ezzy as required on this Saturday morning. We say good morning to everybody that's joining us in the chat. Nice to see, I guess, Aaron is in Nashville ready for the Jets and the Predators tonight, and crushing some White Claw at 9 a.m. So, kudos to you, Aaron, for really getting into the way it needs to be in Music City, USA.
Actually, everybody disagree with Itchy Scratchy the Barbarian, which is an awesome name. I actually like White Claws. I know that, they were a little bit trendy there for a while, but especially in the summer, they go down nice and easy.
They're harmless. I mean, if you just want to drink and you don't really want to taste alcohol, that's, an easy way to do it. Like, what were they? Mike's Hard Lemonades back in the day. I don't know. Do they still make those? I haven't seen those in a while. But those kind of things, they're they're alcohol for those who don't really like the taste of alcohol or beer and don't want to drink wine, let's say on a Saturday morning, that sort of thing. But in any event, whatever you have in your cup, that's good on this to join us with. Aaron is literally he's enjoying his time in Nashville, so that's terrific. Nice to see. Let's get started talking, of course, about last night's Jets Stars game. A game where the Jets certainly they fought hard in order to get the game to overtime, given that they tied it up with mere seconds to go, and then they lose in overtime after they had some ample opportunities to win in overtime. Mark Scheifele with a breakaway, Pierre-Luc Dubois had another quality chance as well. The Jets fall a little bit short, and you look at. After falling a little short last night, I think it puts even more emphasis on just how important tonight's game is in Nashville. Because you come back from the road trip, if you got 3 out of 4 and 5 out of 6 since the All-Star break, well, this week has been a tremendous success for a team that hasn't been able to find that success. Conversely, if you don't get anything in Nashville tonight, and you only are 3 out of 6 since the All-Star break, you 1 out of 4 points possibly on this road trip, then I think you are what you are. You are what you've been. You're the same inconsistent team that we saw before the break. And I'm not saying tonight, redefines what you are, but it goes a long way in helping to put yourself back on that upward trajectory that this team needs more and more than any time earlier this season.
Drew, the Jets are not in Nashville to see, hear good country music on Broadway. That's not why they're there, even though we were there in 2019. And for anybody who's never been to Nashville, it's an amazing city. I mean, there's a lot of amazing cities in the U.S., but Nashville is right up there. I think Drew will back me up on that one, Dave as well. So that was an opportunity wasted in my opinion, right? Like, we didn't talk about it a lot, but the penalty kill was maybe the most impressive area of the Jets game yesterday. Dallas has a great power play. We touched on it, a little bit. So many weapons out there like Roope Hintz, Miro Heiskanen. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Jason Robertson, Tyler Seguin. I mean, there's a reason why, Dallas is, in this playoff race right now, despite the fact that, they had a very hot and cold start to the season. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at last night's game, Drew. And obviously, the Jets don't have tons of time to reflect on it because, they're in Nashville and they got to focus on tonight's game. But, I really liked, how they responded to a sleepy start to the game. And, you love that tying goal from Jansen Harkins. I mean, it was a tie game going into the third period, and that's all you want. And, obviously, Scheifele ties it up late. It looked like the Jets might not get any points, so you're happy with that. But I think when you look at some of the defensive breakdowns, we talked about it. We don't have to necessarily go over all the goals and everything like that. But, I mean, it's still the Achilles heel of this team, guys. Like, we saw them going back to the Minnesota game put together, I thought, 4 almost flawless periods of defensive hockey. They were looking like the 1999 New Jersey Devils, and then they had a few breakdowns. And even though Dallas isn't a world beater, they have players like we talked about, Seguin, Robertson, Roope Hintz. I mean, they have guys that can hurt you and they can counterattack. So it was an opportunity wasted. You at least get a point, but I agree. I mean, you have to get, this is a must win tonight.
I would agree with that assessment, Dave. I mean, as he talks about sort of, from the second after the first period last night, the game certainly opened up a lot. It just, and it seems like the Jets, they always seem to fall back on bad habits, that they haven't been able to break themselves of the bad habits, primarily the ease in which their opponents can get to dangerous areas against them. I mean, we saw that multiple times in the second and the third period, and then in the overtime as well. But the overtime is obviously a different animal with it 3-on-3, and there's so much more space out there. It's just this team; they just seem to not be able to really focus down and really clog up that high danger zone that Dave Lowry has been preaching about since he became the head coach or the interim head coach of this Jets team. You're on mute. We're starting off we're off to a bang on this Saturday morning. Dave M's muted.
All right. Well, what I was going to say is I was probably muting myself because I was going to give you kudos. And so that's probably why in advance I knew not to do it.
Your microphone just automatically shut down.
It's like, are you about to compliment Drew?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think what it comes down to is an often Drewism, which is the attention to detail. And I think, we saw it on certain plays and people are trying to, apportion blame for certain goals against. And Ezzy and I watched some of them back after the show last night. And they're saying, I think it was the Seguin goal wasn't on Scheifele, it was on Lowry because he went for an early hit and left the play. Well, okay, that's true. But if you watch the back check for Mark Scheifele, he's coasting in the neutral zone. Doesn't start to skate till he's, it's too late already because he's got no chance of getting back in the play. So, I mean, it's those little details that the Jets just aren't crisp on. And, when you aren't and you're not, and you're essentially kind of sloppy, well, what ends up happening? You get burnt by it because as just outlined, this is a team that has a lot of good scoring. Didn't even mention Ben, didn't even mention Pavelski, right? There's guys who have look at some of their lines. Their top line, I think, has a combined 60 goals. So you've got a lot of scoring on a Dallas team that, remember, isn't you're not playing a world beater. You're playing a team that's essentially kind of around you and has had a fairly rough season already. So, you came into that game 5 points back. You're now 6 points back. And it's not all is not lost. You know, you still have a lot of games in hand on the Anaheim Ducks who have that second wild card spot. But as you just outlined, Drew, to start the show, the reality is that if you don't win these games, then games in hand don't mean much. And so if you're leaving the points on the board, or off the board, I should say, and you're coming home with only 1 out of 4, well, that's completely unacceptable because you're not in a position to do that. So, yeah, I mean, again, is it must win because their season will be over after tonight? No, but it's must win because it put them into a position to feel good about their game. You know, at least if you can come home and know, okay, you played well in Dallas, but you had a Pittsburgh situation where, you know, you had a few letdowns that end up in the back of your net. Okay, but you played overall a fairly decent game. If you play a strong game tonight in Nashville, well, then you've got something to build on. And then you play a Chicago team, and then you're looking forward to that rematch with the Wild. It'll be the first time you have a full building in a while. You'll have the Lowry and Foligno's back from a suspension, and Minnesota and Winnipeg have a good kind of rivalry anyways. And I'm not looking ahead already to 2 games. I just think what you do is you put yourself into a position to have that good feeling back in your locker room and to be preparing yourself for a run. Because the one thing we've been saying now we've been consistent in what we've been saying is that this team can't afford to win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 1, especially not with 6 straight games against the Central Division. So these are really our regulation wins because all the teams with the exception of Chicago, in theory, are the ones you're battling for a playoff spot. And you can't afford to give points to Dallas. And obviously Minnesota's ahead of you, but you really just can't afford to keep giving up points to your divisional rivals.
Absolutely right. You mentioned the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks did lose last night in regulation to the Seattle Kraken. So that certainly helps the Winnipeg Jets. We were talking yesterday about teams that they gained a point on. Well, they gained a point on the Anaheim Ducks. And as you said, Dave,
is this 2015, Drew?
It might be 2015, as I'm not 100% sure, but 5 games in hand on the Ducks, and now you're 9 points behind them. But really, you got to look at the points percentage, and that's the Dallas Stars are ahead of the Ducks in points percentage, and the Stars obviously gained that point on the Jets with the overtime victory last night. So it's every game. People say, it wasn't last night's game a must win. Well, yeah, because basically every game that this Jets team is playing, from here on out, or, until they can go on a real consistent run, they need to go on a run that you haven't seen from this team since the 9-3-3 start, which was so long ago. It might've been 3 years ago. They need to go on a run where they win 8 out of 10 games, or they get, 17 out of a possible 20 points, something like that. Some just significant run where they bank point after point after point after point, because the losing streak, it might be a little bit in the rear view mirror, but it's not that far in the rear view mirror. Yeah, you had a couple good wins in St. Louis and a good win against the Wild, but that doesn't mean all those bad losses have gone away. They certainly are still there on the ledger. So you need to really string together those wins, and really this is the month to do it. From here until the end of the month, you don't play an Eastern Conference team until March 1st. All your games are against Western Conference opponents. So this is the time right now where you need to, bank those points, clean points, and begin to incrementally climb your way up in the standings as best you can. Or frankly, the month of March might not even matter for this Jets team if they continue with the win 1, lose 1 pattern.
Yeah, 16 games in March. Those are going to be pretty bad games to watch if the Jets are out of the playoff picture. I agree with you. And this Nashville team hasn't played since Wednesday, and it was against Dallas, funny enough, and Dallas won that game. So, Nashville has been sitting at home waiting for the Jets. And obviously, going back to what you said about how important this game is, it's obviously more important for the Jets than it is for Nashville. And I think what's interesting about Nashville, guys, is we knew they were going to be good defensively, right? Like UC Saros is definitely in the Vezina conversation. And I think everybody knew that, Roman Josi, he hasn't fallen off. He's still one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Some people think he is the best defenseman in the NHL. I think Victor Hedman and Adam Fox might have something to say about that, but regardless, he's a top 5 defenseman. And I think, what's been probably the most surprising to most people is that they've had bounce back years from all of the players that have had disappointing years over the last 2 or 3 years, right? So you're talking about Ryan Johansson, you're talking about Matt Duchene, you're talking about Philip Forsberg, right? Like it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about, the Nashville Predators trading
Built.
Philip Forsberg or Ryan Johansson or Matt Duchene, right? And all these guys now are having great years. And then you're getting, a nice performance from a guy like Tanner Jeannot, who isn't really mentioned in the Calder Trophy because he's not going to win it, but he's having an amazing year. He scored a goal against the Jets last time they played, right? So Nashville's
force against the Jets last time. It was his physicality, and the Jets didn't have an answer for his physicality. They looked like, I think it was a 5-2 Nashville win. It was a Thursday night a few weeks back, and Tanner Jeannot was just, nobody on the Jets was prepared to go up against him and match him physicality for physicality. It was almost a bit of a demoralizing defeat in the way the Jets didn't respond to getting punched in the face by a rookie player in Tanner Jeannot, a talented rookie, a big guy, but still a rookie. I mean, you needed to have more of a pushback, and you wonder, do the Jets remember that? Do the Jets remember sort of getting bullied by the Predators last time they played? And can they use that as some fuel and as some motivation on the second half of a back-to-back? Because it is certainly going to be, it's a difficult challenge against the Nashville Predators team. Look, the Jets and the Predators have given up very similar numbers in terms of goals against. The Predators have given up 127 goals against in their 47 games. The Jets have given up 128 in their 44. So the Jets, have done a pretty good job on the goals against category. It's the goals for that's the big difference. I mean, the Predators score at a pretty good clip, especially for a Predators team that you don't think of as offensively inclined. They're 11th in the league at 146 goals for. The Jets are 24th. I mean, the Predators have scored 22 more goals than the Jets. So, I mean, it's going to be, this is a big challenge against a very talented Predators team that is clicking on almost all cylinders entering tonight's game.
Yeah, and I think, that truth is we've been saying that for, I was talking about this last Saturday about how the goals for the Jets are so far behind all the other teams. And so I think that's what we've talked about. I mean, as much as you want Connor Hellebuck to be playing at a Vezina-like level and you have that expectation from him, the truth is he can't score goals. Now, he has to prevent goals that shouldn't go in, and probably that Ben goal would be one he would want back. But the truth is that, this team hasn't been scoring, and getting 3 goals almost is like a big thing for this Jets team because they just haven't had the production. And that's what we've talked about. And so while defensively they needed to be better, and they, as you just outlined, their numbers aren't atrocious in that regard. The reality for this Jets team is that they just aren't scoring enough goals. They're not getting enough production across the board, and that's a problem. And like I said, that's not something you can pin on one guy. There's 2 players in my mind who have gone above and beyond. I'd say 4 probably, because Paul Stastny's been producing, and at 36 years old, he's producing fairly well. You've got Andrew Kopp, who's he's been given an elevated role. He's producing, and of course, Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois are the 2 guys who you would point to and say they've exceeded expectations. But the rest of this Jets team, Blake Wheeler not scoring, Mark Scheifele not really scoring at the level you expect. Cole Perfetti has 4 assists, and again, I'm not blaming Cole Perfetti because we saw for whatever mystery reason he was demoted yesterday to the 4th line, whereas I thought he should have been promoted to the 1st line and given a spot beside Mark Scheifele. But I think that's kind of the inexplicable. Adam Lowry, he's just not producing. Right? These are the guys you need to have goals from, and you're just not getting it. So it's a big problem for this Jets team is that they don't have the secondary scoring, and some of their primary scoring isn't there. And I think unless you address that, and we know that you have to win tight games, but right now the Jets aren't in a position to be like, well, we're defensively responsible. We lost 2-1. You're in a position where you'd rather win 5-4 and at least know you won 5-4 or 6-5. Like if you have to, you have to. But like right now, it's just you just can't afford not to produce, because that's what's happening across this board. And look, guys, we're at a point in the season that was 44. That was the 44th game last night. So you kind of are what you are. Like the Jets have had, like every other team has gone through controversies, and by controversies I mean like COVID situations and injury situations. And like the St. Louis Blues, they've done what they've been able to do without Jordan Binnington being good this year. The Calgary Flames had basically their entire team gone, and they're still fine. So to me, the biggest question mark for the Jets is like, is this just who they are? Is this like we're saying, oh, well, if they just did this, then they would be a different team? Well, yeah, they'd be a different team because they'd be doing things that they aren't maybe capable of doing. Now we think that they're capable of doing it. So
Dave, you mentioned, just to cut you off a little bit early there,
all good.
You know, when you get a goal from a Jansen Harkins, right? So I imagine some people watching are saying, well, the Jets got a goal from Harkins last night, his 5th goal of the year. Well, yeah, but it's been, you know, few and far and few between. What am I? I'm not getting the line right.
Few and far between.
Few and far between. There we go. I obviously didn't play Wordle this morning, Drew. But you know, you got to get that.
It was weird.
From,
the Wordle answer was actually SEG. I didn't expect that to be the answer for Wordle
funny.
Today.
But you know, you have to get that. You can't just get that, you know, 1 out of every 3 or 4 games. You got to get that every. So, you know, can the Jets get a goal from an Adam Lowry? Like, you know, Adam Lowry has definitely had his struggles this year. I think it's around 20 games now without a goal, if I'm not mistaken, right? So again, it's not just Lowry, but you know, can you get something from, you know, Christian Reichel, who's looked really good on that third line? We talked about it. I think it's going to be very interesting, guys, to see, you know, how Dave Lowry runs these lines. Like, is he going to keep the lines the same as they were at the end of the game last night against Dallas, or are you going to see the same lines that we saw to start the game against Dallas, right? Because we talked about Harkins, we really liked his game, but then Perfetti gets demoted and really doesn't play much in the third period, doesn't play in the overtime. We thought he deserved maybe to get we didn't maybe think we thought he deserved more ice time. So it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, is Dubois going to play center, or is he going to stay on the wing? I mean, I know I would put him back up the middle based on the way he played last night, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, what those lines are and if the Jets can get some more depth scoring, because you're right, this year it's been a little bit top heavy with Dubois, Connor, Scheifele, Kopp doing most of the scoring.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to ask you guys about the lines heading into tonight's game after the second half of the back-to-back. And we know that, you know, we expected that Dubois might move throughout the course of the game, but there was probably more juggling than we're used to seeing with Christian Reichel and Jansen Harkins and Perfetti moving down and everything you just outlined there, Ezzy. So, Dave, what do you think happens with the Jets lineup tonight, especially considering that they did, you know, David Gustafsson is wearing a regular jersey, you know, and he's on the road trip. I mean, Nate Beaulieu is also wearing a regular jersey, and he's on the road trip. I mean, I wouldn't expect Beaulieu to come in because I think the defense has been very solid. If Dave Lowry starts mixing up the back end, I'd be surprised, because Ville Heinola has certainly not looked out of place. I think he led the team in shots on goal again last night with 5 or 6, and that would give him about 10 or 11 shots in the last couple games. So I would expect the back end to stay the same, but could you see some changes up front, especially if the Gus bus is ready to leave the auto body repair shop again?
The terminal.
You know what?
Thank you, Ezzy.
I suspect, I mean, that was his first time wearing a non-contact uniform. And I mean, he hasn't played since that, was it January 3rd against Vegas or whatever it was, I don't remember the date exactly, but it was that Sunday afternoon game against Vegas. And I think that, you know, so for David Gustafsson, you know, to throw him in, we'll see. But I mean, honestly, I'm with Frosty Winnipeg. Like, I just don't understand why you wouldn't just I mean, I've been saying this for a while. Adam Lowry is your fourth line center. He'll be a shutdown guy. You can play him on the PK, but like, you need production from a third line center. So Paul Stastny, put him on the third line, like make him your third line center, you know, and just try and get a little creativity there, because right now you're just not getting that production. So yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I'm, you know, screaming into the abyss because I don't know that it's going to actually happen, but I just think that you need a center who's going to produce, or put Andrew Kopp at third line and keep Stastny up, because I actually think Stastny has better hands than Andrew Kopp, even though he's 36. So I think that your production needs, you know, we talk about
balance, Dave, right? Like, that's
it's got to be balanced,
but it's got to be balanced. Yeah. And even having Andrew Kopp, like I told you guys this yesterday, maybe we could talk about this, like, you know, the idea of having Andrew Kopp as your third line center, right? Because obviously, you know, with Dubois out, Kopp moved up to the second line, but that's I think the beauty of Kopp. He's such a versatile player. Like, we used to call Michael Frolik the Swiss Army knife, but Kopp is that guy, right? He's an excellent penalty killer, can play on the power play, can basically play wing or center on any single line, right? So by doing that, I think you spread the wealth a little bit. I also really like Lowry and Kopp together. So I realize, guys, we're kind of doing the the Saturday morning blender here, but I think the point is, I mean, yesterday clearly, I mean, you didn't have all 4 lines going. I thought Minnesota was maybe, you know, the best example of a Jets team, you know, that can actually roll out 4 lines and, you know, have some scoring chances on all 4 lines. But I think you have to figure this out, because you're essentially healthy without Ehlers. Ehlers isn't coming back for at least 2 weeks. maybe longer. I mean, that's what we've been told, right? So Ehlers
no,
isn't coming back.
we don't. Basically, he's eligible to come back in 2 days, but it doesn't sound
He's
like
a ways away still.
Yeah, he hasn't skated, right? So
no, you're. I just wouldn't give a timeline on it, but I mean, technically, from LTIR, he's allowed to come off in 2 days. But the reality, as you said, Dave already said he's
probably a week to 2 weeks. Yeah.
If you saw Ehlers before March, that would be a surprise from my perspective at this point. Based on
I would agree with that.
Based on what Dave Lowry said, I mean, we don't have exactly. He didn't put an exact timeline on it, but just given all the given what he said, it would be surprising if he's back within the next couple of weeks. I would
just go with this. I mean, to me, I would keep. Like I said, I would either put Paul Stastny as your third line center, or I would go back to the old line that you worked so well with at the beginning of the year, and you have Dubois with Svechnikov and Connor. Put Perfetti up with Scheifele and Stastny. Put Wheeler on the third line with Lowry, and then at least if Wheeler's with Lowry, then maybe Lowry's got more chance for production. And then you can put them with the guy who's going to work his ass off, like Christian Reichel or Jansen Harkins, actually. So you put Harkins with Lowry and Wheeler. And then your fourth line is Toninato. Who would be your fourth line? Toninato, your spare parts line, really, at that point. I'm not
Toninato, one of Harkins or Reichel, whichever one's not on the third line. I mean,
yeah, that's great.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I don't look. I mean, I have no reason to. I mean, I understand the logic that you're expressing and why you want to see that. I have no reason to believe that we're going to see anything like that.
Well, you didn't ask what are we going to see. You asked what would be the ideal lineup that the Jets could ice tonight.
Well,
so that's why
I think
I'll
tell you what, here's what
I was going to say
go
this.
ahead.
We're going to see Kenny Wiebe in a couple minutes time. So why don't we take our first commercial?
We're going to hear him too.
We're going to hear him. We're going to see him. We're going to laugh. We're going to smile. Everything along those lines. Our buddy Ken Wiebe is going to join us next. Kenny of Kenny and Rennie. Stay with us. Oh, actually, Ken just texted me. Oh, somebody needs to send Ken the link. Ezzy, you didn't send Ken the link.
I did send Ken the link.
Oh, okay. Well, you might have to send it to him again. So
I'll send it to him again. No problem.
And we'll bring Ken in right away. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live Saturday morning on our YouTube channel.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think Illegal Curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted, thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the Illegal Curve Sandwich.
The Illegal Curve Sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of the hour, Saturday morning. Wake up! Kenny Wiebe, Kenny and Rennie joins us on the program now. Dave Manouk's here, Ezra Ginsburg's here. I'm your host, Drew Mandel. Good morning, Kenny. Nice to see you, buddy.
Good morning, gentlemen. Nice to see you all as well. When I heard the words Gus Bus in the chat, I thought that's the equivalent of my bat signal. The sign was the sign was up in the air, and it was time to get on the air here. And I apologize about the links. I know that technical difficulties are on brand for KNR and not for the illegal curve, but sometimes when the wires get crossed, things just happen.
Just blame me, Kenny. That's what Dave and Drew do. Just blame me. It's all good.
It's true. It makes things a lot easier when you just sometimes they used to blame Canada. Now we just blame Ezzy instead. Here's one for you guys before we start talking about the Jets. That's courtesy of our friend Joe Pascucci. I did not know that Alexei Zhamnov was the head coach for Team Russia at the Olympics. Apparently, I'm out of the loop on that one. So
another Manitoba connection at the Olympics. Patrick Fisher was once a high school student at Carman Collegiate and a member of the Carman Cougars high school hockey team. So very interesting times on a lot of fronts. And then of course Eddie Pasquale, one of the many Jets folks involved with Team Canada, and Michael Frolik, all kinds of guys at the Olympic Games. So some plenty of connections, but the Patrick Fisher connection is one that not as many people would be familiar with. But the good folks in rural Manitoba would love to see him behind that bench as well.
See, Weber, I caught that connection. That was of course subtle,
you did.
But you went from Patrick Fisher to Eddie Pasquale, of course, the Carmen Eddie the Eagle connection there. So I caught on that.
It's a different Eddie the Eagle, but you're close. You got the same name as me.
No, but yeah, we're talking Eddie Pasquale, but we were talking about Carmen, obviously, Hall of Famer Eddie Belfour from Carmen. So Patrick Fisher is the second most famous hockey player to come from Carmen.
And to completely wrap this up, Ezzy's going to order dinner from Pasquale's restaurant later on tonight. So
there you go.
Great rooftop patio in St. Boniface.
There you go.
Good little hidden gem there, Drew.
I know, it's one of your favorites. That's why I mentioned it there, Mr. Ginsburg. In any event, we didn't wake Kenny Wiebe up this morning to talk about random stuff like that, although, let's be honest, we did. Kenny, last night, the Jets dropped a hard-fought decision to the Dallas Stars. We were talking about it. You heard the chat, or you heard the conversation before you joined us about the line juggling that went on, particularly late in the game. I want to start with the demotion of Cole Perfetti, sort of, for the final 20 minutes of the game. He only played 2 shifts. From our perspective, and maybe you saw something different, I thought he looked like he has for the last number of games, setting up Jansen Harkins with a beautiful pass to lead to the tying goal, the 2-all tying goal. Were you surprised to see him get demoted for the third period of last night's game?
Yeah, I mean, Drew, I'm going to start on the other side. I think that Jansen Harkins was promoted more than Cole Perfetti was demoted. Now, I know, obviously, Perfetti did not play as much, and I actually love the fact that Dave Lowry went to him later in the third period with Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry. And here, what I would say is, even though I've liked a lot of what Christian Reichel has done, I would have liked Perfetti to get a shot with those guys a little bit earlier in the third period when the Jets were chasing the game a little bit. But to me, quick thing about Perfetti. I thought he handled himself incredibly well in a very heavy game on Tuesday against the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, there was some pushback in the game, and I think it was Jared Spurgeon who kind of caught him from behind along the boards. Actually, like the fact that he stood up for himself. I mean, some people will say he's complaining to the ref. I mean, that was a clear push from behind. So I like the fact that he's showing the confidence to engage. We know that rookies don't always get the calls and all that, but I loved his game the other night. His vision and passing ability, obviously on display on that power play. Obviously, the 2 setups to Ville Heinola and 1 to Paul Stastny, exceptional. The drop pass to Jansen Harkins was a fantastic read and a great job of pulling the defender over to him to create a little extra space for Jansen Harkins. But to me, guys, I don't think that Cole's pace was. We know he's not a burner. So to me, I didn't think he was as noticeable in the game yesterday, except for the drop pass, which again, it was an outstanding play and use of vision. And as I like to say, he's got the word processor spinning at such a rapid rate all the time. A lot of players don't even recognize probably that Jansen Harkins is in the frame. But during the course of the game, I didn't think that he was as noticeable, and no shot attempts. I mean, that's something we've talked about. Dave knows this, especially from watching him. He's got a really great shot. I thought in recent games, he's been looking for his own shot a little bit more. But yesterday, I thought he was a little bit back to deferring a little bit more, like what we saw earlier on. Again, lowest ice time in 12 games. I don't think was deserved. But after what we had seen from Cole Perfetti, I didn't think he was as active and noticeable in the game. Having said that, I would have liked to have seen him get a couple other shifts on that third line. And again, you could easily make the argument that on a night where things weren't always rolling, I think there was some decent chances for obviously Mark Scheifele converted, but you could have maybe seen him pop up for maybe one shift for a Paul Stastny or something like that. Just because Stastny is another guy that's been used with Adam Lowry in the past and has had some success with him. So again, do I think that Cole could have played more than 11 minutes and change? Yes, but I would also counter two guys that with just the one power play for the Jets, Perfetti's minutes were shaved also on that front. It was only a shortened and condensed power play. It was only 126, I think, and the top unit played the whole time. So I think that kind of impacted the numbers. Again, there have been some nights where Cole's had high ice time. To me, this is getting to a Nikolai Ehlers sweet spot situation, even though it's much earlier in the process. I personally don't think Cole Perfetti is ready for 20 minutes a game on that top line, just in terms of the physical toll it will take, especially this week coming up, 5 games in 7 days, or 4 and 6, pardon me. It's tough on the body when you're playing so many of these heavy matchups. Having said that, I would like to have seen him play a little bit more, but I didn't see this as a straight up benching per se, but obviously some other folks will see that. And I mean, you guys are talking about secondary scoring right out of the gate. I mean, Jansen Harkins is one of those players who needs to provide that secondary scoring, and I thought his game was high, a little bit more noticeable than Cole. Obviously different players, but he's a big guy. He was creating some chaos on the forecheck, using his speed really well. And, Jansen Harkins made another great play in the third to set up Kyle Connor for a point-blank chance so that Jake Ottinger stopped. So, I understand folks these are players that are hot button issues for the Jets, whether it's Heinola or Perfetti. They want them to play 20, 22 minutes, get all the on-the-job training out right away. I've said this from the very beginning. There are going to be hiccups. I don't even consider that to be a real hiccup for Cole Perfetti. It's just a situation where some nights he's going to play 11 or 12 minutes. Some nights he's going to play 16. Some nights he's going to blow you away almost every single shift. And other nights he's going to be looking to find his way. I mean, also Dave knows this. Last year I came and watched Cole on a day game after a night game, and I think it was 3 and 4. And you could tell the legs weren't there. This was in the first half of the season, but he still found a way to make a contribution. I mean, because of his smarts and because of his passing. So it's part of the process. I mean, I think folks always forget this is a couple of 20-year-old guys. And I mean, we'll transition to Heinola shortly, I'm sure. But Cole Perfetti is doing an excellent job. Nothing is permanent, as Paul Maurice liked to say at one point. And he's going to spend more time playing in the top 6 than he's going to be demoted. But there are going to be times where a coach isn't going to lean on him to the same degree as he had been prior to last night's game.
Well, Ken, there are 2 permanent things: the Illegal Curve post-game show and the Kenny and Rennie post-game show. So I wanted to get that in there. But, I want to transition, we'll maybe talk about Heinola, but I wanted to transition to another, you mentioned hot button issue, another first rounder who was a healthy scratch yesterday, Christian Vesalainen.
Sure.
And, you see, I mean, you guys, I know, see it, in the chat on the Kenny and Rennie show, and we see it. A lot of fans frustrated with Vesalainen. A lot of fans would like to see him, on the second power play unit. But what can Dave Lowry? I mean, how does he manage this situation right now? I don't know if he's even considering putting him in tonight against the Predators. I imagine he's going to stick with the same forward group. Maybe he'll surprise us and we'll see Vesalainen. But what is your kind of take? Because I think you'd agree, on the fourth line, only playing 7 or 8 minutes and not getting any special teams. work. I mean, it's kind of hurting him right now, right? I think he would definitely benefit from being out there a little bit longer. But how do you see Vesalainen being used for the rest of the season, I guess?
Now, again, obviously Dave's seen him more than I have, but I was fortunate to see him a couple of times at the American League level where he uses all of his tools and they're showcased with regularity. Now, again, part of that is opportunity and ice time, but the translation just has not happened for Christian Vesalainen with enough frequency. Here's a guy that has a very good shot. He moves pretty well when he's engaged as a big guy. He can win board battles, but when he was used, he had tons of opportunity early, for me, and the fact that he wasn't able to generate much on that third line with Adam Lowry and the rotating left wingers in those situations, it sort of put him at a disadvantage. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, yes, he has the skill to be on the maybe second power play unit, but I mean, I think that I would personally use Svechnikov ahead of him because he has the same kind of idea, the same shot. But the problem for both of those guys is that while we see that shot going bar down in practice, the opportunities are far less frequent in game situations, and the finish just has not been there. And I understand totally. I mean, you're not as confident when you're not playing as much. But when you're in that situation, just like Jansen Harkins, of course Jansen Harkins would be frustrated at times, played mostly on the fourth line. He gets a bump up shift and scores. So naturally the player is thinking, hey, look what I can do. Put me out there with skilled guys all the time. You'll get production, like classic chicken and egg syndrome. And that's the way that it is for Christian Vesalainen. I know a lot of fans are frustrated that there are tools in the toolkit that should translate into a very effective NHL player. But I mean, Dave would agree, he's not a top six player right now. He just has not done enough to get into that level. And I understand that because of the shot, you'd like to see him on the second power play. But I mean, Cole Perfetti has come in with less experience and already taken what available jobs are maybe out there for a second power play kind of guy. So, man, I understand the frustration, but to me, things started to change with Christian Vesalainen. The year he started with the Winnipeg Jets, he got a secondary assist in his first game against the St. Louis Blues, but his choice to go back to Finland, to me, that hurt his development. Now, I understand why he did it. We know that, I mean, the players make $70,000 in the minors and, a couple $100,000 in Europe. So, of course, you would like to probably go for the money as chance to play for his hometown team. But to me, he needed that year in North America to transition to the North American game. And I think there's been a lot of fits and starts because of COVID. But to me, that's where things started. I'm not going to say go south with Vesalainen, but he didn't get a ton of ice time or responsibility when he went back there to play in the KHL. And I think that kind of, it sort of set his path back a little while. And he hasn't fully recovered. At least that's my view. I mean, like I said, the skills are there. You see him in practice. But this is a guy who needs a jolt of confidence in order to start being a little bit more of an impactful player.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel. Our guest is Ken Wiebe of Sportsnet and, of course, of Kenny and Rennie. That'll be on after us and the Illegal Curve post-game show tonight after the Jets and the Preds. So let's assume that if we're going to be at around 8:45, they'll be around 9:45-ish or so, thereabouts, for the post-game show after what'll be undoubtedly a busy Saturday for all of us here on our YouTube hockey chats here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, doubleheader, just like the double fight almost, right? The other night, that's like when you have the two scraps breaking out at one time, basically. So we try to space it out because we know how passionate the YouTubers and the listeners are these days about the Jets right now.
And of course we are lovers, not fighters, between
exactly.
between IC and Kenny and Rennie. Nothing but love.
Even pacifists at times, right? So
that's right.
Lots of hugs, lots of fist bumps.
Yeah, apathy is a great thing sometimes. You're right about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kenny, we're no longer Finnipeg, but I'm going to go from Finn to Finn because Philly Heinola has played now 6 games. His confidence level really looks like he's settled in after that first game where he looked a little unsettled, but you can just see him gaining that level of confidence. I think he took the most shots for defensemen last night. So what are you seeing in the 2019 first rounders game of late?
Yeah, I love the way that he responded. I mean, there were a couple of, I used the word hiccups before. I would say there were some hiccups in the game against the Panthers, which are expected and natural for a guy who missed as much time as he did. There were times in the second game against Vancouver where I thought he was better, but there are going to be bumps in the road. Obviously, outstanding game against the St. Louis Blues. For the most part, very good against Philadelphia. I know that there's been tons of debate. I do think he was a little bit aggressive on the pinch. But again, Neil Pionk didn't play the 2-on-1 very well. So I would also say yesterday, I thought Hainla was very active. 5 shots on goal, and these weren't 5 shots on goal generated by someone joining the rush recklessly. I thought he managed the risk-reward element of his game very well yesterday. I know that some folks didn't like how I personally didn't like the way that he played the odd man rush. Now, again, the odd man rush was created by an aggressive and probably poorly timed pinch by Neil Pionk, and obviously we know that Mark Scheifele was not expecting to have to back check in that situation. He was a bit late getting to Seguin, but again, if we want to praise these young guys all the time, we also have to point out the minor flaws. I mean, he was put in a bad position by his teammates, but he took neither the man with the puck carrier or the guy that he passed to. So that's a minor thing that's going to happen. It happens to veterans also. Like I said, I'm not criticizing Ville Heinola for the sake of criticizing him because some other players let him down. But in that situation, much like I didn't think Pionk played the 2-on-1 against the Flyers overly well, again, it's a lot easier playing that, and it's a lot easier saying, you should have slid the other direction from your couch. Now, I also understand that part too, but I think overall, Dave, I think that Heinola's puck handling ability, his vision, his skating ability, all of those things have been on display. Of course, we know that he needs to work on his defensive zone play, and as you've seen, he has taken steps to work on those things. I've seen some progress on those fronts, but again, Drew, you talked earlier about ice time. For me, when the Jets get into a situation of chasing the game at times after the Benn goal, I would have liked to have seen a shift for Ville Heinola because of those offensive instincts. The ability to get the puck moving north, the ability to get shots through, which we saw again yesterday. Now, again, this is part of the development process. And again, we're not far away from, the coach tapping him on the shoulder and saying, hey, now you can raise the risk profile a little bit. But I would also say that the elevation of I've loved the pairing of Schmidt and Brennan Dillon. It's something that I wanted to see for quite some time. And as we like to see, you can check the receipts and you can see that I'm not just coming late to the party on this one. And again, Brennan Dillon, much more physical of late. I mean, he's always been a physical player, but I think he's finding that sweet spot of when he can attack with those big kind of open ice hits. Again, I said I didn't love the fact that he had to fight after a clean hit on John Klingberg, but to me that was more of a cumulative effect. I think that Jamie Benn probably didn't like the Rope Hintz hit as much, and it was one of those things where, to me, it reminded me of the first day of training camp when after Brennan Dillon, took a run at Mark Scheifele, hit Christian Vesalainen, hit Adam Lowry, and then nearly took Kyle Connor's head off. That's when Blake Wheeler kind of came by for the flyby and said, hey man, we get it. You're a physical player, but let's save these for the opposition. Yeah. So Jamie Benn obviously knows Brennan Dillon very well. They were teammates, and I'm sure you guys saw it as well. I mean, if that's a fight against somebody else, I don't think that Jamie Benn pulls him in tight, whispers in his ear and said, hey man, I had to do that for my team. And if you weren't my friend, I would still be punching you in the face right now.
That wasn't Lowry and Foligno on against the Wild. It was more, it wasn't about anger as much as it was about tone setting, let's say.
Yeah.
Kenny, this Jets team, at the beginning of the year, if you'd say that their bugaboo would be goal scoring, people would have probably laughed at you and said, how can this team struggle to score goals? But the reality is they're towards the bottom of the NHL in terms of goals for. Their goals against numbers are pretty decent, which is, of course, the opposite of what we would have thought. What is the MO for this Jets team to really have extended success? Not to win one, lose one.
Yeah, for sure. And if I knew the answer fully, I would be in the coach's room trying to help.
Marty Johnson can go back to the Moose, and you can go next to Dave Lowry.
Well, I don't pretend to have Marty Johnson's level of knowledge, but I appreciate the sentiment. But no, that's the thing. I did not have bottom third in goals for on my Winnipeg Jets bingo card this year. We've been used to them being able to outscore many of their mistakes, warts, errors, whatever you want to say it. Oddly enough, on a night where the Jets do score 3 times, which is something that hasn't been happening with as much frequency either.
They lose.
I think just the 3rd time in the last 9 games. I think if my math was correct there, maritime math. We know what the week has meant for you guys, and I wouldn't call it happy anniversary, but excellent job. Sorry to go on a tangent here, but I think it's important as someone who spent some time on those airwaves as well. Great job with what you've been able to do and persevere. And I love what everyone has done, whether they've stayed in this industry or not. Sorry, back to the original point.
The sentiment was appreciated, though.
Yes, the trip. You guys know I like to go to the buffet. I love to eat. So I will eventually get back to the start of the line here and return to the table.
You have until 10:30. Scott Wheeler's not till 10:30, so you can tangent all you want.
You have a good 40 minutes here.
You guys know that I'm happy to spend some time on a Saturday morning. So for the Jets, they need not only secondary scoring, which you touched on, and you're right. I mean, Adam Lowry is an important player in this Winnipeg Jets team. Adam Lowry needs to be a guy that is producing double digits in goals for. He's shown that he can do it before. I think he will do it again. But he needs to get a little bit of offensive mojo going. I think that with all of the fluctuation in line mates, I think he's probably been hurt among the most on the Winnipeg Jets because outside of that, Tuesday was kind of back to what we're used to seeing in terms of, I think that was great, not just because of the fights, but his engagement level. Being asked to go up against Kaprizov was something that Adam Lowry loves to do. When he knows that's his job, he can do it well. But, when he's had a Christian Vesalainen on the line, it's not a shutdown line. I mean, Paul Stastny is a smart defensive player, very conscientious and can do that job. But, I mean, he doesn't play with the same pace as he once did. So it's harder to go head to head with some of those teams' top lines when you haven't had the same combination. So I don't want to veer into another subject where you guys were discussing earlier, but I expect that Adam Lowry and Andrew Kopp are going to be together tonight to start the game because they're going to want them out against Forsberg or, whether it's Johansson or Duchesne or however way the lines are constructed by the Predators here this evening. I think that those two guys will at least start together. But it's also interesting because the Jets have had some of their best success when Kopp has been at center. So there's this push and pull happening here if you're Dave Lowry, because and again, you guys touched on it, Nikolai Ehlers, and just to fly off the handle once more, I don't expect Ehlers back before, if Dave Lowry said 2 to 4 weeks, I don't think it will be before 3 weeks. I mean, this is a team that's very conservative when it comes to injury timelines. Now, again, if Nikolai Ehlers has proven to be a fast healer in the past, maybe he can speed up that timeline, but I never thought he would be available for that February 14th game when he was eligible to come off LTIR. This is a serious injury. And yes, he's played with pain in the past, but it's a serious injury. So the Jets need to get Ehlers back, though, as soon as possible, and he's going to want to be back as soon as he can. But in terms of further generation, I mean, they need more nights when they have more than just one single line going, and we've seen it in the games that the Jets have had success in, or even played well in. They have contributions throughout the lineup. I mean, even yesterday, you could make the argument that Dubois' line came from a third line shift, right? So they had secondary scoring there, and then Harkins scores, so that's also secondary scoring, and Scheifele's goal comes from an extra attacker situation. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, the Jets played to their quote-unquote template, but what their biggest issue this year has been is that the errors have been so glaring that they've ended up in the back of the net. Again, yesterday, 56-second span of the game completely changes the complexion. Not to say the Jets were dominating that game, but they were playing very well and kind of, in a lot of ways, had dictated the pace. And then all of a sudden, much like the Penguins game, 2 goals in that was obviously in 9 seconds or whatever, not 56. But that was a situation where the game complexion changed. Now, I think the Jets kind of steadied themselves. And again, I think you guys talked about it last night, I'm sure. I mean, that wasn't really a penalty on Mark Scheifele in a tie game. Great job by Tyler Seguin. I mean, this is the problem. In real time, the stick was in the hands to begin with, but then Tyler Seguin with the veteran move kind of gets the hand in tight, and then it looks like an obvious penalty. But when you look at the replay, you're like, oh boy, that officials aren't going to like that one really that much. And no, the Jets were fortunate they killed off the minor, but then in the kind of chaos that ensued afterward, kind of a little bit of a clear shot by Gurianov and Jamie Benn. Here's the example. Dave Lowry said before the game's going to be one net front. Well, guess what? The Jets are much better in box outs, but Jamie Benn's a hard guy to move. And surprise, he gets to the front of the net. And I understand some folks are like, oh, well, Hellebuyck should have had it. Well, he wasn't expecting the shot to go through the 5-hole. It was tipped through the 5-hole. Like, some folks were suggesting it's a soft goal. I mean, a soft goal is one that you should have stopped, 90 times out of 100. To me, that's not a soft goal. I mean, is it one where Connor would have liked to have squeezed the pads a little bit sooner? Of course, but he doesn't know where the tip is going. And first and foremost, Ben shouldn't have been able to be standing free there. And someone should have been in the shot lane on Gurionov. So, I mean, you guys touched on it earlier there too. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck has not been superhuman at times for this Winnipeg Jets team this year, but it's not like he's been terrible either. I mean, it just, he hasn't been superhuman. The Jets have been used to superhuman Connor Hellebuyck. And for a good chunk of the game, he was all of those things. But at the same time, to me, it's the structural things, that the breakdowns. I mean, they played as a whole, their structure was pretty good, but their breakdowns are so severe that they end up in the back of the net, and then guys kind of look at each other and are like, man, like...
that happened quickly. That escalated quickly.
Right. So yeah, it's super interesting. And sorry, I mean, to say, I don't have the pinpoint of the answer, but I know that they need more guys going. I mean, to think that Pierre-Luc Dubois was able to come off a 9 or 10 day layoff and have that much of an to be that much of a big of a factor in the game, he imposed his will on the hockey game. For a guy who had been on the ice one time on his own for an hour and at one morning skate, took Casual Friday to the next level and referenced Motley Crue. Pretty good morning for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then a pretty good showing at night. And again, I also know that some folks were jazzed about why he didn't just get promoted back into the top line. Let's not forget, guys, just over 1 year ago, after emerging from a 14-day quarantine, Pierre-Luc Dubois got hurt in his second game against the Calgary Flames. Or sorry, the first game was against the Flames, right? Sorry, the second game. Yeah, the second game against Vancouver, he finished the game, but then ended up on the shelf with a lingering injury that kind of bothered him the entire year. So to just say, this guy is an absolute bull in a china shop, but to just open the gates at, Assiniboia Downs and say, sprint to the finish line, let's give you 22 minutes, that I don't think is necessarily the smartest plan for Dave Lowry and his coaching staff either, which is why he started partly on the wing and on the third line. Now, when he shows that he has the legs, you bump him up, and that's what he did. And I think Dubois will be back with Kyle Connor for sure. My guess is that it's Perfetti, but it could be Harkins. I mean, what have we been talking about for years, guys? We want a reward system that rewards players who are playing well. So, I mean, if you're Jansen Harkins and you showed the coach you could do and got some things going, you probably want to get another shot. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see Perfetti back up in that spot and maybe some tinkering with the other units.
Kenny, I'll kickstart your heart here. I want to go back.
There you go.
I want to go back to Connor Hellebuyck. If you haven't seen the documentary on Motley Crue,
I have. It's incredible.
Well, I guess, was it a documentary? I guess more of a
biopic. I guess.
Yeah, biopic. It's unbelievable.
The Motley Crue equivalent of the Queen movie, or whatever you want.
I still haven't seen that one. Queen's a great band too.
You haven't seen the Queen? The Queen
oh
movie?
Man, also
Bohemian Rhapsody is a good movie.
I've been too busy watching the season. What is it? Season 4 of Ozark, Part 1 season. Anyways, I'll get to the Queen movie eventually, Drew. But yeah, it's a good show. Just going back to Hellebuyck. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, kind of, Kenny, of like what to ask you about. There's obviously no shortage of things to ask you about with this Jets team, who's desperate to win the game. But is it ridiculous to suggest that Connor Hellebuyck might start again tonight? Like, we've seen him start a couple of games before, obviously different circumstances. And I think you would agree that there's a good chance that Eric Comrie goes in. But like, what would you give the odds of Hellebuyck playing again? Because I agree with you. I didn't think he was that bad yesterday. I think he faced 35 shots. Like, based on just considering the stakes, is it possible that Lowry's even considering going back to him?
Oh, he's definitely considering it. I would even put the stakes at definitely I would put it in the 70-ish range, to be honest, and it might even be higher. Definitely, the usual me would say 50-50, but I honestly think that because of the circumstances, we saw how well. This is a similar travel circumstance to what we saw when it was Boston and Pittsburgh. I know, yes, there were 23 hours between games. Now it's 22 and a half. It's not a taxing flight from Dallas to Nashville. Yes, the volume ended up getting to 35 shots, and it ended up with overtime going 63 minutes and 10 seconds. But to me, I didn't think it was an overly taxing game for Hellebuyck. It wasn't a 50 save affair like we saw against the San Jose Sharks a couple years ago. because there were 2 days between games, and because of how refreshed Hellebuyck would have been able to be coming out of the break. And the other thing too, because Comrie played that game against St. Louis, that bought Connor Hellebuyck his initial chance to recharge the battery cables. For me, that also allows Dave Lowry to go back to him today when, normally we would have had this game circled as an Eric Comrie game. And that's to say nothing about the abilities of Eric Comrie, who played an exceptional game against the St. Louis Blues. I expect we'll see Eric Comrie at least once next week. We know there's another back-to-back coming up with Minnesota and Seattle. I originally thought maybe you might even see him Monday against Chicago, but I just think that it's more likely we'll see him in that game against the Seattle Kraken.
Sorry, Kenny, I was just going to say, I would expect, looking at the schedule with Chicago next after tonight, I was thought that you go back with Hellebuyck tonight, you give him from tonight off until Wednesday, and then you can go with Comrie Monday against Chicago, and then Thursday against the Kraken, and then Hellebuyck gets another big chunk of rest between tonight and Wednesday's game.
It's possible, Drew, and again, I could see that if the Jets weren't in such dire circumstance, I could see that as being much more likely, and that's what I thought initially. But then now, when you start to think that maybe Chicago's a team that's, what are they still only? They'll be 5 points now back behind the Jets, right, instead of 4. Yeah. They aren't the free spot on the bingo card anymore either, and that's not to say Comrie needs a free spot on the card. He just beat one of the best teams in the Central. But for the Jets, because of the same thing we're just talking about, the urgency, if it's urgent for him to play today, why wouldn't it be urgent for him to play Monday, right? So to me, I think also too, we know the workload has been heavy. 36 starts now, right? So I think that because those games were spread out and because of the break in January, I think that you could see him ride them back to back today, and I think you'd see him Monday as well. Now, having said that, I think the Jets would be comfortable putting Comrie in. I just think that based on where they are, and again, yesterday's another classic example. The Jets could have been 3 back if you get that done in regulation. Instead, you're 6 back, and now instead of, maybe you were thinking about going to your backup, now you're like, no, now I got to ride my starter again. And, I thought it took a lot of courage for Dave Lowry to play Eric Comrie against the St. Louis Blues because of the fact he hadn't played since December 10th. Again, not because he's not capable, but man, oh man, that was a stiff test for him. And Eric Comrie answered it with probably one of his best starts of the, I think maybe one of the only other ones that was that solid was the game against the Islanders that he lost. I thought he was great in that game as well. So Comrie will be ready. He's done an exceptional job of keeping himself engaged and locked in. He's almost always the last guy off the ice. He's always taking shots. And I do think we'll see him more in the second half. But man, I said I put the over-under for the last 40 games at 32.5. And it's, unless the Jets fall out of the contention, it's hard not to bet the over, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Ken Wiebe is our guest Saturday morning. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. Hour number 2 already started. And remember, later tonight, the IC post-game show, followed by the Kenny and Rennie post-game show, all available on your favorite respective YouTube channels.
Well, Kenny, you just mentioned something, falling out of contention, which will lead me into my question, but I'm going to go for a bit of a two-parter here. First of all, I'm going to ask you about David Gustafsson, when you think we might see him, and obviously how tough it's been for him, having the injuries against the Capitals and against the Golden Knights. But if the Jets do happen to fall out of contention, we've been talking about the Manitoba Moose for quite some time and what this team has been able to do without all of these players. But though, just how impactful do you think, because you covered the obviously the Manitoba Moose 1.0, and so you know how important it is as a farm club for development for these guys to go on a run. How impactful do you think it would be for this, if the Jets fall out of contention, and we're not saying they're going to, but if they do, how impactful would it be for Cole Perfetti, all the defensive prospects, David Gustafsson, Christian Vesalainen, to be able to get that chance to go for a Calder Cup run, which this team seems like they're likely to be able to go for this summer?
Yeah, it'd be massive, and I think I'm glad that you mentioned Vesalainen, because historically people would think, well, Vesalainen is an NHLer now. To me, you guys know how much I love baseball. To me, this is like when you send guys to winter league, to play winter ball. Whether it's to change positions or to get confidence or get extra ABs. To me, Christian Vesalainen absolutely should be on that clear day roster list. He is accessible to them. He's a guy that needs the jolt of confidence, and he needs a coach to lean on him. So I think it's essential for him to be on that list. For a guy like Cole Perfetti, another massive step in his development. And again, we all think that Cole Perfetti is going to stay with the Jets, in varying roles or whatever. Like I said, I don't think he's necessarily going to be a 20-minute a night guy every night down the stretch run, even if they were to fall out of contention. But Cole Perfetti needs that experience. I mean, I saw what it did look at how many guys got playoff experience with the Moose before they went to the Stanley Cup final in Game 7 in 2011 with the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, ultimately falling to the Boston Bruins. But a lot of those players had various levels of experience. You had some guys that played in that Calder Cup against the Hershey Bears, I believe, as well. Again, Corey Schneider obviously didn't play as much. It was Luongo's show. But
and Kenny, Matty Perreault was on that Hershey team, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that also, too, it didn't just help the Vancouver Canucks. Look at how many players from that team ended up graduating to the Washington Capitals and were a part of their successful program and, eventually leading up to their Stanley Cup win overall. I think it's incredibly important. You've seen it. You saw it with the Ottawa Senators before they went to the Stanley Cup final and lost. Binghamton had a great run with a lot of those young guys. I just think that it's something that can be such a cohesive thing for teams. We saw what it meant to Ben Sherratt. Ben Sherratt, who had, I remember the story so clearly and vividly, talking with Ben Sherratt. He went into Keith McCambridge's office. Keith is like, this was after the year that Sherratt made his debut against the Chicago Blackhawks. It looked like he had turned the corner. Things were going to be going great. He went through some tough times. Keith basically looked at Ben and said, I should make you a healthy scratch, but I'm not going to do it. And that basically was the turning point in his season. All of a sudden, he's back playing top pairing minutes. This team goes to the Calder Cup final against the Texas Stars, and then Ben Sherratt comes up and becomes an impactful, top four defenseman. So, I mean, I understand, like, the young guys don't necessarily view it through that lens, but you saw it with, Jeff Carter and Mike Richards when they let, the great year of the World Juniors, they went out and went to the Calder Cup and had a great experience there. I think it's just so valuable. Even too, like, you look at Josh Morrissey and even Mark Scheifele had a playoff round with the St. John, or no, it was late season edition there. So I think it's so important for those young guys. Adam Lowry had a great run with St. John's that really helped him transition. I think it just, the more meaningful games and the high level hockey that you play, especially, I mean, Dave, everyone who follows it knows that this level is an exceptional level of hockey. There's such a great experience to be gained from a young player that is put in a situation where he's leaned upon, especially when there's veteran guys around them. And that also kind of leads me to league. Mark Morrison's just done a fabulous job with that Manitoba Moose team and the entire coaching staff. We know it's not just Mark, but Mark's done an excellent job, picking up the ball after Pascal Vincent's departure. But man, I think it would be incredibly valuable for those guys, and I think not just the guys that are with the Jets, but the guys that are with the Moose, like a guy like Mikhail Burden. I mean, we debated this last night with Scott Billick. I mean, if the Jets fall out of contention, do you get Burden some starts, knowing that he's on a one-way deal next year and is no longer waiver exempt? Well, sure, but the more valuable thing for Mikhail Burden is going and playing 3 or 4 rounds of the Calder Cup playoffs and potentially leading his team to a silver trophy at the end of it. But I also think too, I think Arvid Holm is a fascinating goalie prospect. To me, I know he's a guy who's worked really hard in his game. I know it was a tough goal last night. I didn't see the circumstances, but he's a guy that I want to see more of at that level. I think he's got a great demeanor. I mean, the one time we did talk to him during training camp or the rookie camp, I loved his answer. Here's a situation where you wonder if he might only be 5th on the depth chart. And he's like, you know what? If I play well, I'm going to play, which I love that. It seems so simple, but it's a concept that a lot of young players can't grasp. And having covered the American League for 10 years, there were so many players who with incredible ability who just couldn't get over the mental hurdle of, why is that guy getting called up instead of me? I'm better than him. I do this, that guy doesn't do that. Whether you're a first-round draft pick or an undrafted free agent, the less time you spend worrying about why things aren't going well for you and looking for solutions to why it could be going better for you, the better off those players are going to be. And again, sorry for the other trip to the buffet, but I love that you asked, Dave. And I'm looking forward to seeing some more moves. Nobody was more disappointed than me than the travel snafus last week, because I wanted to see that Moose game on Monday that was coming up. I had set aside some time on the calendar, had a family dinner on the Sunday, so I couldn't make the matinee work, but I was looking forward to the Monday game. And when it was postponed, it was a disappointment to me because I wanted to get in there and see some of those guys, especially too. The lineup on Sunday was spectacular, right? Because you had all those defensemen who had just been in the NHL lineup the previous game in the lineup. And one final thing, and I know that we love the social media and we love the uproar that it creates and the passion and the buzz, but for all the people going crazy about Ville Heinola being returned to the Manitoba Moose, it wasn't as a penalty for what happened at the end of the Flyers game. For all the people that were complaining about Heinola being parked in the press box because it hurts his development, he didn't need an all-star break. He needed to play a game, and that's why he was sent to the Manitoba Moose. So
use the waiver exemption while you can.
Exactly. And too, same thing. I mean, Dylan Sandberg's another guy. I know he's hurt right now, but Dylan Sandberg to be leaned on in a 18 to 20 minute kind of situation for, if it's 1 month, if it's 2 months, those minutes are so valuable when you get ready to become an NHL regular. And I mean, we applaud what's happened with Declan Chisholm, Johnny Kovacevic, all of those guys. 11 deep the Jets have gone on the back end, and you wouldn't even say that the bottom four on that depth chart, if you will, going into the season, have hurt the Jets. They've actually helped the Jets in a lot of ways on the back end, and it's given them the flexibility for Kevin Cheveldayoff to now make a choice about what he wants to do in terms of the future and maybe expediting some of the timelines, which would probably mean moving out one of the veteran guys. I mean, not saying it's going to happen now, but you at least have the flexibility to do so, where you went from, being short on the back end to having a surplus. So, I mean, the teams want to go 10, 11 deep, but now you have the ability to maybe make a trade that can help you, make up for some of that scoring that hasn't been there, as the Jets kind of went from a top 10 scoring team to a bottom third team that is looking for some more offense. Or maybe if you're looking to change the roster composition, maybe you need a little bit more size to go with your skill on the third line. So, I mean, such an interesting time ahead. I know you guys said I could stay till 10:30, and if I talk for the next 17 minutes, we might just eventually get there. But no, it's a fascinating time for the Jets, especially how they handle this trade deadline. It's not just for this year, guys. This could set the path for the direction the Jets are going to take in terms of competitive window.
100%.
But I think that there's more likely to be a blockbuster in the summertime, because right now with 16 teams in LTIR, you're limiting the field. So if you're moving a big foundational piece, you basically are eliminating almost half of the bidders from the equation. So I know some folks would say, well, it's too late now. If you don't do it now, you can't salvage your season. This is one of the times where I think a trade of that kind of magnitude, moving a $5 or $6 million player, if that's what it comes down to, they can't be a panicked move either for the Winnipeg Jets. But I do think that we could see some major, and again, it also goes back to the players. If those players elevate their respective games in the second half, now we're not talking about the potential for a trade. You're talking about them getting back to being the players that they've been historically. And one thing that, again, some people see it as an excuse. I see it as more of a reason. Let's not forget that after yesterday's news, we're almost 2 years deep into a pandemic, and everyone is impacted differently in terms of COVID and how they handle it, mental health, everything else. Yes, we know they're pro athletes, but these guys are human beings too. I've talked to a lot of scouts in the last 2 years, and Dave, I know you see a lot of them in the press box too. Of course, you're making evaluations during this time, but you better be careful about saying definitively that this player all of a sudden isn't a good hockey player anymore because he struggled at times during COVID. So I think that's always something that, I mean, just from the human being and the human spirit element of things, I think that's something that is always important to remember. I know that a lot of us are frustrated on a lot of levels, but to lash out and to maybe take those frustrations out on players is probably not the best way to direct your energy.
Obviously, you're new to social media then, Kenny. Kenny Wiebe is with Kenny and Rennie. He's with Sportsnet.ca. He's weekly with a column on CJOB.com. Did I miss anything, or did I catch it all?
No, I think you've basically covered all of my
your different homes.
Yes, exactly.
I think you forgot
versatility.
Elite golfer.
Versatility, very important.
Hole-in-one specialist.
Hall of
one
Fame
aficionado.
member. Hall of Fame member. You
Yes.
get that.
Hall of Fame member. Yeah.
Baseball. There you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll save the Vikings chat for a different day.
Multi-sport athlete. Yeah. There you go.
Well, we look forward to it, and I do have to say, because Sean wasn't with me last night, we had the first Kenny and Rennie sighting at River Heights Arena. We shared the ice for the very first time with our Friday skate yesterday. Came away. It was a fun event. And we had a really good time.
That's where I learned to skate, Kenny. That's my childhood right there.
I don't know where my invite. Did you guys get an invite? My invite somehow got lost in the translation.
I'm still.
You
looking
have to be able
forward
to skate backwards to play in that league.
Right? There you go. That's my problem.
I'm still looking forward to getting onto the ice with the curves. I know there's a fun skate that you guys have on occasion as well. So, but again, to reiterate what I said before, I know a year ago was a hard time for a lot of people. You guys have done an awesome job of keeping the brand flowing. I love the expansion into the merch side. I know we've sort of been dabbling in that as well, but it's great to provide a space for fans to communicate. We know how passionate the fans are around these parts, and it's great to be able to have these kind of conversations. And we talk about versatility and transition all the time in life, and the ability to kind of take the program to YouTube and to have folks really respond the way that they have had to so many of the shows, whether it's Winnipeg Sports Talk or you guys or Brandon or Wiki and our show. I mean, it's been awesome to be part of that. And I love to see, Kenny. I'm looking forward to the future growth. I mean, some people also forget we kind of just got this started over a year ago, and we're kind of learning on the fly, but it's a great space, and keep the passion flowing, and have a wonderful weekend, guys. Thanks to be.
Just wait till the velour tracksuits come out.
Onwards and upwards, Kenny Wiebe. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks for this morning. Be well, and we'll see you later.
Have a great day, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Ken.
Enjoy the game tonight.
You too. Kenny Wiebe, Kenny and Rennie, post-game show after us, and the Illegal Curve post-game show later tonight. Let's head to break. When we come back, more on the Jets. Scott Wheeler at the bottom of the hour, joining us to talk about Jets prospects. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube. Thanks so much for everyone for joining us.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think Illegal Curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the Illegal Curve Sandwich.
The Illegal Curve Sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
10:20 in the morning. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thank you to Kenny Wiebe for joining. It's always a great time to get together with Ken. Reminder, later on tonight, the IC post-game show, the brains of the operation will be around. Myself and Dave M. We're giving Ezzy the night off so that he can spend some quality time with his wife and prevent himself from getting the.
We've got a hot date tonight.
Where are you going for dinner?
We're actually going to go to Ray and Jerry's. We're going to take it back old school, a little IC trivia for the folks out there. My grandmother, my late grandmother, whose middle name, my daughter's middle name named after my grandma Hazel, loved her. She used to work at Ray and Jerry's, and so did my mom.
Oh, well, there you go. I did not know that. Yeah. So it'll be a trip down memory lane for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you love Ray and Jerry's too. I mean, it's just classic. I mean, Clubhouse and vintage. It's always good.
It is always a good meal that I'm sure your wife will enjoy spending quality time, I guess, with you as the case happens to be. I mean,
we're actually sitting at separate tables. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Very funny, Ezzy. All righty, the Jets later on tonight. So Dave M and I will hold down the fort later on tonight, right around 8:45 or so, give or take a couple minutes there. Have to say a happy birthday to my mom. It's a big milestone birthday for her.
70th
happy birthday.
Yes. What'd you say, Dave?
Isn't it her 70th?
It is her 70th. Did we talk about that when your mom turned 70? Is that
your mom looks amazing for 70?
There you go. So it's a big. We're having a nice little dinner with her for her tonight. So we'll be
little soiree.
A little soiree, not a big soiree, just a little soiree, but it'll be nice nonetheless. So happy birthday to my mom.
Is that Ray and Jerry's?
It's not at Ray and Jerry's. It's at our house. You don't have to worry about crossing paths with me in public.
We'll swing by after.
Yeah, you can swing by all you want. You won't be invited in. That's perfectly fine. What you heard what Ken said about Hellebuyck versus Comrie? What do you guys think? Do you think it's going to be Hellebuyck or Comrie tonight?
Well, it's kind of amazing, right, guys? Because I think this is a completely different scenario than last time. What was that? That was a while ago. I want to say it was about 6 weeks ago or longer when Hellebuyck played the back-to-back games. What was it? Boston and
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. I couldn't remember the other team there. Yeah, Kenny.
But
yeah, I think there's a good chance we'll see Hellebuyck. And this is, not a knock on Eric Comrie at all, but I think, we know Hellebuyck loves to play, and we know he can play back-to-back games, and he can play a lot. And I think, when you consider that you've got the back-to-back coming up next week at home against Minnesota, Seattle, you're going to use Comrie most likely in one of those games, probably the game against the Kraken. So I'm going to lean towards Hellebuyck, but I won't be surprised if Comrie gets the start tonight in Nashville.
Yeah, my impression is that I'm leaning towards Hellebuyck, and I think they'll go back with Comrie on Monday and probably Thursday. That way, Hellebuyck gets the big chunk off between Saturday's game and Wednesday's game. The Wild game, obviously, being the hardest of the games on the calendar for next week. We'll talk about the Oilers next Saturday. We don't have to get too far ahead of ourselves. Dave M., you mentioned, Kevin Cheveldayoff finally met with the media. He emerged from hiding earlier this week and had his usual mid-season press conference where he said used a lot of words to say not a lot of anything. What was your impression, Dave M., of the press conference from Kevin Cheveldayoff?
Well, we're always having conversations, and in those conversations, we're speaking with words, and words
we're discussing, we're chatting, we're talking.
Honestly, like my biggest takeaway really was just his comments about Nathan Smith, the 2018 third rounder, who's currently over in Beijing playing with Team USA. He's obviously, or he was when he left the United States, he was leading Minnesota State, and he was leading the NCAA in scoring. He's now, I think, Bobby Brink of University of Denver, who's a Flyers draft pick, has now tied him. He may be ahead of him after last night's action.
That's a great hockey name, by the way, Bobby Brink. That's just a really, it just rolls off the tongue. It's just everything about that is,
back up the Brink truck, right?
Well,
that's right.
There's so many puns you can use with it. It's just Bobby Brink.
Got the alliteration. Yeah.
So I thought that the comments by Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about how he met with Smith after the Jets were in St. Louis, he obviously must have been with the team. He flew to Minnesota, had dinner with Smith, and they talked about, what that's going to look like. And because, of course, Jets fans are anxious to see if he'll, right shooting forward, if he'll come into the fold. The Jets have control over him until 2023. So it's not that as if they need to get him signed or they'll lose his rights by the end of the summer. But I like I said last night, quickly, I think that you're seeing like an Andrew Kopp, University of Michigan type situation with Smith, where, they'll get him under contract. They'll burn a year of his ELC. And then that way he'll be incentivized to come and play pro maybe a year earlier than he expected. And I think a lot of that will have to do with what happens with Minnesota State and whether they, go on a run and, win a national championship. If they can, then that probably will mean that he'll feel more inclined to turn pro versus falling short. So that'll be something that's worth, staying abreast of. And the other thing, really, the other takeaway was just that, and this isn't a shock, but he was just non-committal. Like I thought he was not okay. So there's a couple of things. I thought he was non-committal in terms of his willingness to talk about the trade deadline and what the plan is for the team. That's not a huge surprise. But I thought that he kind of dialed it back, because if you remember, after Paul Maurice resigned and Cheveldayoff spoke, he kind of put it on the players. He said, well, now this is on them. But I thought that when he was asked that question this time around, he dialed it back a little bit, because, of course, there's only so many times you can, Kenny was using a horse racing parlay, and there's only so many times you can go to the whip, and especially through the media. So I think
the horses get whipped.
Well, they do have jockeys too.
That's
the same thing Neil. It's the same thing Neil uses on you.
They like that, Dave.
No, I
stop that.
Let's not get Peter.
I mean, it's not that. I mean, that's when they're hitting the horse. This isn't just for show, Ezzy. They're actually doing something to get the horse moving when they go like this.
You would know, Drew. You're whipped.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's interesting that he pulled that back and didn't really use that card again, because of course there's only so many times you can play it. So, I mean, it was a standard. What did he speak for 40 minutes or 30 minutes yet on Thursday, or Tuesday, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was. There was nothing terribly insightful from
a lot of rhetoric. There's no doubt. I agree with you, Dave. I mean, you wanted him to say something a little bit more, because we haven't heard from him since he had to come out and talk about the Chicago Blackhawks / Kyle Beach affair. I don't think we've heard from him.
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong.
we did.
When Maurice was dismissed.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Sorry. Only the second time. So, wasn't that surprised. He's got to be very careful. And as you mentioned, Dave, we've been covering the Jets for all 11 years, Jets 2.0, obviously, and he usually keeps his cards very close to his chest.
He certainly does. Let's welcome our next guest to the program. Scott Wheeler of The Athletic joins us. Now, I'll apologize on behalf of Scott, because he was in the midst of a move, and unfortunately, the timing got a little screwed up. So that's why he's a big black dot right now on the screen. If you're able to turn your video on, Scott, that's terrific.
Great to see your face, Scott.
I got you guys. You guys get the nice view of my car here with my cardboard boxes here.
That's good.
This could not have been more unprofessional of me here, fellas.
It's all good, Scott.
I had an alarm set for this, and then the alarm went off, and I'm sitting in my car getting rid of cardboard from our move here. So,
Scott, don't worry about it. Marty Baron is constantly doing our show from his car. In fact, oftentimes he's stealing internet Wi-Fi so he can do it. So you're in good company right there.
Okay.
We would recommend you not drive while you're answering the questions, but we'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, no, I'm parked in a Shoppers Drug Mart Plaza here.
Oh, there you go. That works. Scott Wheeler from The Athletic is our guest this Saturday morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Scott does a great ranking every year of all the organization's top prospects, and including the Winnipeg Jets. And we wanted to bring Scott on to talk about his ranking of the Jets prospects. And Scott, you had the Jets ranked number 11 of the 32 NHL teams. Yet you say sort of in your introduction that the Jets were one of the more challenging teams for you to rank among the top 32 of the league. Why was it so difficult for you to find the spot for the Jets among some of the other teams?
I think there are two main things. The first is that they have a pretty considerable top end. I would say that the first 3 or 4 names on their list grade out not as high as the teams in the top 5 or top 6 per se, but in that next tier, they've got a really, really strong. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Cole Perfetti. I actually had Chaz Lucius in my top 10 last year in advance of the draft. So Chaz is a player that I'm really fond of. So the quality there is huge. I mean, even Ville Heinola, I mean, I know you guys are kind of waiting to see him and waiting to see him really grab hold of it and run with a sort of 82 game roster spot here. But I think he's going to be a legitimate second pairing guy. I think those other two guys are going to be top six forwards. In Cole's case, I think you might end up with a potential star. So I'm really high on those three, but on the flip side, it's a thin group too. It really does start to thin out. Most of the teams kind of in that 10 to 15 range in my rankings run 20 prospects deep. They run in many cases into the teens in terms of quality, kind of B grade prospects, if you will. And you don't really have that in Winnipeg. It does start to taper off sort of closer to 10 in terms of the number of quality prospects that I think have a legit shot to play NHL games. So it's a thinner group, but then you're balancing that against that high end trio at the top, who are three kids that I'm higher on than most scouts, in fact. So that was the tricky part, but I think they ultimately settled kind of in the right range. I had a clear top 9 prospect pools in this year's ranking, and I think they settled right at the front of that sort of second tier in the middle third of the league.
Scott, and I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Ville Heinola there, and I agree with Drew. I mean, we have to give you huge props. You do an amazing job for The Athletic, breaking down prospects, not only, that have already been drafted, but obviously, the 2022 draft class coming up. And, I think, Heinola has been a player that, Jets fans have wanted to see more of, but because of the circumstances with COVID and taxi squads and other just veteran defensemen ahead of him. But I'm not sure if you saw yesterday, he had 5 shots on goal, which is a career high for him. And I have the article here on my app here, and I wanted to read it because you start off the analysis of Heinola. You say he's got a strong foundation of quiet skills that have increasingly begun to get louder and louder. And I thought that was really well written, because he's a guy that obviously, has that offensive upside, and he also makes just those quietly really good defensive reads. And you go on into the article to talk about that as well. So I imagine you're not at all surprised with how much success he's having with the Jets, especially now that he's getting just more and more confidence.
Yeah, he's always had that sort of escape pressure and make a 5-foot bump pass down pat, right? That's been the bread and butter of his game since he was a kid. And he has increasingly grown more and more ambitious. I think one of the concerns that scouts had with him in advance of his draft year was that he just wasn't quite aggressive enough with the puck. He had the talent to escape pressure and start exits and lead entries and walk the line and make those sort of basic plays that you expect talented defensemen to make in today's NHL. But he wasn't really looking to attack. You didn't see him below the goal line in the offensive zone involving himself in the play all that often. You didn't see him really sort of trying to be 2 layers of pressure instead of 1 layer of pressure. And I think now at the AHL, we've seen that. It will take him some time, I think, in the NHL to get that confidence, to get a leash from the coaching staff that will allow him to play that game. But I do think he's starting to play not a roving style, but a more engaged, a more active style with the puck. And I think that's going to make him a better player long term. If he can find that game in the NHL, suddenly you've got a guy who can't just break the puck out and move the puck and defend well and use his feet and all of that. You've also got a player who's got some real quality offensively to be able to walk off the line and carry the puck deep into the zone and try to take over games rather than just sort of making the right play all the time. So I'm fascinated to see what Ville becomes. I think, again, he's got a chance to be that sort of number 3, number 4 guy who can run your second or potentially even first power play, depending on who else you have in front of him on the depth chart, and really contribute at both ends. And he kind of fits that modern defenseman mold as well. There are a lot of players now who begin to look like Ville Heinola. We're seeing a lot of defensemen come into the league who have that shape that he has. So I'm a big fan of Ville, and he's grown on me over the years. I was high on him in his draft, kind of had him around 20 where he was taken. But even since then, he's impressed me, and I think he's ready to take the next step here.
Scott, one player we had the fortune of talking to after he was drafted was Chaz Lucius. He's got an infectious personality.
Oh my God.
And, he's one of these kids who, you heard about, what his exploits were in his draft year and how he was, obviously he was dealing with his injury but he had all this talent. He seems to be putting it together a little bit, had a goal and assist last night for the University of Minnesota, but he's not a player that folks get a chance to watch a lot because not a lot of people have that package. So what are you seeing from him? He's got 9 goals, 9 assists so far at Minnesota right now.
Well, first of all, he's just a fabulous kid, and I don't often say that about hockey players. I'm always struck, normally about once or twice a year when I write stories in advance of the draft on the top sort of 15 or 20 kids that interest me. There's always one kid who kind of leaps out. Coincidentally, Cole Perfetti was that kid once upon a time, and then last year Chaz was as well. And both of those kids are so articulate. They're so well-mannered. You don't feel like you're talking to a hockey player when you're talking to either of them. And then on top of that, they're ridiculously talented as well. And I actually think Chaz, because of the knee injury, and it was a weird knee injury, right? It was kind of a cartilage, soft tissue, bone issue more than it was blowing out his ACL. And because of that, there were lots of question marks about his health, how an injury like that heals long-term, and what that looks like for him. And increasingly, as this season has progressed, I think he's put those to bed. He's been sensational, frankly, in the last sort of month and a half, 2 months of the season after a bit of a slow start at Minnesota. And I think you're starting to see that sort of goal-scoring quality that defines him. He's going to be the kind of player who puts the puck in the net and plays on a top power play unit and has that unique sort of game-breaking quality as a shooter. So that's his bread and butter. The skating and the size and getting stronger have always been kind of the question marks, but I actually think he's a much better skater than he often gets credit for. And he's going to be an impact guy. I think if Perfetti is a first-line player, I think Chaz is going to be a very good second-line player. And I think there's a good chance that one of those guys is a 55, 60 point guy, and the other guy is a 70, 75 point guy. And if you can add two pieces like that through the draft, that is a tidy bit of work, considering where they were both taken. So I'm really a big fan of both of those kids, not just as people, but certainly as players as well. And I think Chaz was one of the better sort of value selections of last year's draft. And I expect that after 2 years in college, you're going to see him turn pro at the end of his sophomore year, and he's going to have an impact almost immediately, would be my guess.
High praise. Scott Wheeler is our guest Saturday morning. We're live here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Scott covers the NHL and covers draft prospects for The Athletic. Now, Scott, since the Jets returned to Winnipeg, they haven't dipped their toe into Russia too heavily. Yet this past draft, they went there twice for guys that you're high on in both cases, Nikita Chibrikov and Dmitry Reshevsky. Chibrikov, of course, 18 second-round pick. Reshevsky, he's older, 21, has been passed over a couple times in the draft, but he was a 5th-round pick last year. I guess your thoughts on both of those guys since they've been drafted, and is Reshevsky maybe this diamond in the rough, maybe the proverbial late bloomer that the Jets are getting some good value on later in last year's draft?
Yeah, I think Reshevsky, if you were to count on two hands the players from last year's draft who've had the best follow-up seasons relative to where they were picked, Reshevsky's in that group of 10 players from the 212 or whatever it was that were selected. So he's improved his stock. He'd be probably a 2nd-round pick today rather than a 5th-round pick in a redraft if you were to do it all over again. He's been great. He's been an impact guy in the KHL as a rookie, and that really is quite rare. We typically see players in the KHL take a year or two to go from playing sort of 6-7 minutes a night to 12-13 minutes a night, and then eventually 15-16 minutes a night. And he kind of bypassed those first two steps and immediately became a top 9 guy on that team. And not just a top 9 guy, but a guy who is on the second power play and who is scoring goals and making an impact in what is arguably the second best professional league on the planet. So Reshevsky's a great story, already a great story. And I think there's a belief amongst many scouts that I've spoken to about him that despite the fact that he's older, he's kind of early in his trajectory. He's kind of early along his path, which bodes well for what's next for him. So I think you'll see him come over eventually at 22, 23, 24 years old, like a lot of those KHL guys do. Most of those players prefer to stay there and make the immediate jump to the NHL rather than coming over and playing in the AHL. So I think he's probably in that same boat. But if he comes over at that age, I suspect that if he keeps on this path, he'll be a middle six piece. He's not going to be a true impact guy, but I think you could have him as a complementary forward make an impact. And then Chibrikov is really interesting. He's a kid that, again, like Lucius, like Perfetti, like Heinola, I was high on in his draft year. And liked that pick where they got him. So he's had a very good season as well. He's on obviously a little bit further behind Reshevsky, but that's predominantly because of his age. And I suspect that he's going to become an impact scorer in the KHL in the next year, maybe 2 years, and then you go from there with him as well. So Chibrakov's a really, really interesting player. My colleague Murat's actually currently working on a story on him at The Athletic, and he's got some quality to his game. So, you're right. Both of those kids are legitimate pieces.
I mean, Jets fans are hoping there's a little Kirill Kaprizov in Nikita Chibrikov, right? Maybe that's going a little bit too far, Scott, but looks like he is going to be a very good prospect. And, wanted to ask you about Christian Vesalainen. We had Kenny Wiebe on earlier, and we talked to Weber about Vesalainen, and he's 22 years old. People, I think, forget that he still is a prospect for the Jets, and he's obviously played a little bit with the Moose, and he was a healthy scratch last night. And you mentioned enigma in your description, and I think it's bang on, because I think we've all expected, not just because he's a first round pick, because of the size and the fact that we've seen that big shot with the Moose in the AHL. Like, is there more to this? Like, is Vesalainen, and again, I think you would agree, we're not going to say the BUST word, not only because it's a 4-letter word and it wouldn't work in Wordle, but just because, we don't want to say that for a 22-year-old. But I mean, it just always seems like we're wanting more from Vesalainen.
Yeah, and I think enigma is kind of the perfect way to describe him. It's become a bit frustrating, not just, I'm sure, for the Jets, but for people who have watched him for a long time here. It feels like he's been around forever. He showed so much promise in Sweden and even in Finland early on in his career. And now you're kind of waiting for him to become more than just a guy. And increasingly, I think it looks like it might be hard for him to become more than just a guy. And given how talented he is and what he showed at lower levels, and given that size that you talked about, that has to be a little bit sour. So I try to ignore the where he was drafted piece of the puzzle, because I think we can get carried away with that. But even ignoring that, just as a player, he should be more than he is. So I like to, I've pumped all the tires of these guys, but Vesalainen's a player who I find very difficult and frustrating to watch at this stage in his career, just because you're right. So often I watch him and I'm just left wanting more. And it feels like again and again, he just isn't making plays out there, and he should be with the tools that he has. So I don't know what he is at this point, and the clock is starting to tick, because once you start to get 22, 23, 24 years old, waivers becomes a factor, and all of those things start to chip away at your reputation, and then suddenly you're just an AHL guy. So he needs to figure it out here, and I'm just not sure what that looks like for him anymore, because he doesn't seem to really fit the checker mold well. He doesn't really look like a bottom six guy, and he certainly hasn't played well enough to earn minutes in terms of offensive opportunities. So he's in a sticky situation for sure.
Scott, we talked about Chaz Lucius and getting a chance to speak with him. But I think probably the most heartwarming video of the 2021 NHL draft was Dmitry Kuzmin's video that they shot over in the KHL with his grandmother, and showing her excitement and what is Winnipeg and all that stuff. So, I mean, he seems to be a really great kid off the ice. What can Jets fans expect from the third rounder on the ice from the Belarusian?
Well, he's a project for sure. Anytime you travel such an unconventional path, which, let's be honest, coming up through Belarus and not going elsewhere until this year to play is a very different path that has seldom produced any kind of NHL talent. Obviously, last year there were 2 kids. The Canucks took another Belarusian. But in saying that, I think he's had a fine first year in North America here. I think hasn't looked out of place. He's actually defended better than I thought he would, and maybe his offense hasn't quite come like I thought it would. He obviously really wowed everybody at World Under-18s with his skill level and his ability to hang on to the puck and his ability to make plays off the point. And he's a really fun, slick, sort of puck carrying type. And I think increasingly you're going to see him do more of that in the OHL. He plays at a program that frankly hasn't surrounded him with a ton of talent as well. So that's a piece of it. And then you've got billets, and you've got the language barrier, and you've got a new country, and all of that enters into the equation as well. So I think he deserves a little bit of grace and time. He's certainly a long-term piece of the puzzle if you're sort of looking at an NHL future. But the talent is there. He can really skate. He's got great edges. He can handle the puck. He's confident in sort of on the attack. And then I've been really impressed by the way he's defended good players this year as well, which is a nice boost for him, and I'm sure a confidence builder for him. So I expect him to take a big step next year, and then you sort of go from there with him.
Scott Wheeler of The Athletic is our guest Saturday morning. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Scott, we were chatting by email before, and I said I was going to ask you about Nathan Smith, because anybody who is looking at your article, and we tweeted out a link to it from The Athletic, they would notice that Nathan Smith is not listed there because he's over 23 years old.
Yep.
And your criteria are that you have to be under 23. Earlier this week, Kevin Cheveldayoff met with the media here. He talked about Nathan Smith and about trying to get him under contract. We know he's playing overseas at the Olympics with Team USA right now. Most of the time, you are what you are when you get to be a certain age. And Nathan Smith would certainly be a late bloomer as well. Do you see him as a bona fide NHLer, or what do you see his career trajectory when his college career comes to an end, be it after this year or be it after next year, whenever it might be?
Well, I think he'll follow the trajectory that you typically expect out of most sort of non-first rounders coming out of college, which is he might get a cup of coffee late in this season if they manage to sign him, play a few games, and then next year he's a training camp guy who competes for a job, but maybe starts in the AHL. And I think that's kind of the path that you expect. The teams typically like to get those guys into games right away just to see what they have, because they haven't played professionally and because they haven't been involved with the system in terms of development camps, prospect tournaments. The college guys never participate in those kinds of things. The teams typically want to kind of trial by fire, like drink out of a fire hose and let's see where you're at kind of situation. So I think if he does sign this year, that's what you should expect, is for him to get some games almost immediately. But that doesn't mean that he's going to be a full-time NHLer. And I still think he's the kind of prospect who's going to need some seasoning in the AHL. Certainly he's on the older side. I mean, you touched on it. He's 23 and he's a junior in college. He's in his third year in college despite being 23, which really does make him very old in terms of the context of college hockey players. So he was late to enter college, spent a few years in the USHL. It was kind of a circuitous route for him, but he's arrived now for sure. He's the second leading scorer, I believe, in college hockey at the moment behind Bobby Brink. And he's a legitimate piece. I don't think he's going to be a top six guy per se, but I think he's the kind of player you could serviceably use on a third line and kind of slide up and down the lineup and have him contributing in a variety of areas. He's just a good, effective hockey player. And every team needs those guys. Not every guy has to be the sort of dynamic star, right? So I think he's going to be a piece of the puzzle for them and eventually a top 12 regular guy in the lineup who contributes offensively. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with him. It's not hard to imagine him on a second power play unit or anything like that either. So he's been kind of quiet, I must admit, through the first two games at the Olympics. He's of the sort of NHL prospects on that team, of which there are more than a dozen on that USA team. He's probably been one of the quieter players, but I wouldn't read too much into that. And he's still had a tremendous year in college, obviously, and looks like he's going to get signed and become an option.
Scott Wheeler covers the NHL draft and prospects nationally for The Athletic. Scott, appreciate your time. Appreciate your insight into some of
Dylan
these
Sandberg question, Drew. I mean,
okay, sorry, go ahead as he asked one more question.
Get in there. I know, Scott, you got to move, but come on, I got to get my Dylan Sandberg
The
question.
guy's got to
that
get
was
to
abrupt.
the recycling center, for God's sake, Ezzy. The cardboard's not going to sort itself.
Yeah. Scott, do you know if Dylan Sandberg is able to help you move today?
I can use his muscle.
Yeah. He was ranked 7th in your prospect pool rankings for the Jets. And I think some Jets fans might, maybe think that's kind of low, just I think because of the fact that we've been waiting so long. And he got into 6 games this year and looked really good, but again, suffers an injury. And he's just had the worst luck. Dave covers the Moose regularly, and he would tell you that, it's just really unfortunate that Sandberg, just had to get, has to sit out again. But I guess in your evaluation, do you still see him having that upside of being a top 4 defenseman? In the article, you mentioned that you see him playing regularly at even strength and, on the penalty kill as well. I guess, that second part of the question is, what did you think in his 6th game with the Jets as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I released the ranking and then he played those first couple of games back with the Jets and was excellent. And I immediately had questions because the gap in between when the ranking came out and when he played those games and he had impressed in those games, I immediately had questions that said, would you have moved him up after seeing him play? And the answer was kind of maybe, yeah. Like he was kind of always in that 5 to 7 group for me. I wouldn't have him in the top 4 that we've already talked about, but he's right in that next group. And I think he's a legitimate guy. And The offense, I think, got skewed a little bit in college late, just because top prospects tend to get power play time in college hockey. They tend to put up points, even if they're not going to be power play guys or productive guys at the next level. And I think Dylan kind of fit into that category where you're never going to see him on a power play in the NHL, even though he was on one in college. So I don't think there's a ton of offense to his game per se, but he's huge. He can really skate. And if he can stay healthy at that size with his mobility and his ability to defend, and then also just competently move the puck, I don't want to say that he's not talented. He's definitely got some talent as well. He's going to be a second pairing guy is kind of what you imagine for him. And if not, he'll be a darn good third pairing guy, I think. So that's kind of the mold that I envision him. I could see him playing 18, 19 minutes a night on an NHL team. And he may not be the 23, 24 top of the lineup guy, but I think he's going to be in that next group. And he can certainly defend at a high level. And the size helps and gives him a little bit of a different look than a lot of the players that are coming up, including Kuzmin and Heinola, who obviously look much different than Sandberg does. So it's good to have that variety within their group.
Scott, I'm going to also sneak in here and get one last one.
You have too much knowledge to share with our audience, Scott. We need to get more and more out of you.
Anytime we can do prospect talk, I mean, a lot of the prospects, especially the ones on the Moose, we get a chance to cover, but the other ones, we don't have that fortune really. So, the last couple of years prior to this one, the Jets had gone in the second round. They'd gone with Swedes, and we were talking Daniel Torgerson, who obviously was dealing with injury, and Simon Lundmark, who we've actually now had the opportunity to see. And he's really been a beneficiary of all these Jets call-ups, because Lundmark, I think, has really blossomed into a kind of almost like a Dylan DeMello, very solid type player. But the one I really want to ask you about was Torgerson, because of course he had to deal with the injury. So what does it look like for him, and what can Jets fans kind of expect from him?
Yeah, another guy who was like Sandberg on a really promising path and then dealt with a pretty gruesome injury that set him back basically a year. And that's disappointing for sure. I've spoken to people with his club teams, plural, because he's played for 2 different teams this year over in Sweden. And they still like him. They still like him as a guy who can really shoot the puck, who can really skate, who's got size, who has filled out his frame. He really used, according to the staff over there, really used the time off to get stronger in the gym and to bulk up and to add some muscle. And he was already a strong kid before. So he's kind of in the vision for him, if you will, over there is to turn him into kind of a second line SHL power forward scorer type, and then potentially a third line kind of piece in the NHL if he gets lucky. So I think now, because of the injury, the odds of that sort of coming to fruition look longer than they did in his draft year, when he really lit it up in the Swedish junior ranks and looked like a legitimate offensive piece. But if he can become a complimentary sort of bottom 6 guy with that shot of his, who can also put the puck in the net every once in a while, that's still good value in where he was picked. So Torgerson's still interesting. He's still worth keeping an eye on, but the injury is definitely a talking point in terms of what comes next for him, and it's set him back for sure.
Scott Wheeler is with the Athletic. Scott, next time you're moving, we'll hook you up with our friends from Rolly's Transfer. They're one of our official sponsors, so they'll be able to take care of all that cardboard for you.
They'll move your piano, Scott.
And they will move your piano too, yes.
Next time I'm moving, I'll make sure I'm in front of a laptop for this rather than in my car as well.
That's okay. It worked out perfectly well. Scott, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Enjoy your time at the recycling center, and we appreciate your insight into these Jets prospects.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. There you go.
Scott.
Scott Wheeler of the Athletic joining us for some great talk about
that was awesome.
Prospects.
Drew, we got to pump him. I mean, he's got that. I mean, it's one thing for us to talk about Moose prospects, because of course our Jets prospects on the Moose, we see those guys all the time. But the ones we don't get a chance to see, those are the ones. I mean, people ask me a lot of times, like, oh, what's his comparable? And I'm honest. I'm saying I don't really watch the games enough to be able to tell you with any sort of authority what Nathan Smith looks like, because I don't watch a ton. I'll see the highlights. I'll see what he's done in the game. Same with Chaz Lucius. Same with a lot of the guys overseas. We don't get that opportunity to really see.
Dave, if you were more dedicated, you would be watching Swedish Junior Hockey League games, and you'd be able to give us more insight. I mean, there's no one to blame but yourself for your shortcomings here.
I agree. Trust me. It's one of those things I lament on a daily basis. But the reality is, it's always good to get some insight, especially like I said, on a guy like Torgerson, who we don't hear from or about. He's a second-round pick, and you want to know in 2020, and you want to know what's his trajectory, what's the story with him. And so it's good to get that sort of insight. Kuzmin as well. Like I said, that was an amazing video that his KHL club, that that they put out. And so, but you're curious, how's he doing with Flint and what's it going like? What's he been able to do? So interesting to hear that sort of insight from a guy that, like I said, we're not able to watch.
That's Michael Moore.
Yeah, that was very clever, Ezzy. That was
from Flint.
I know he's from Flint. I understood the reference. That was a bit of a deep esoteric reference, but I understood where you were going.
Well,
with it
I am
anyways.
esoteric. You know that, Drew.
You're very esoteric. That's the exact word I would use for you more often than not. Let's take our final break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the Saturday edition of this program, get you set for the Jets and the Preds, and get you set, of course, for the post-game show after that. Stay with us. Saturday morning, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think Illegal Curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the Illegal Curve Sandwich.
The Illegal Curve Sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
And we're back. Big thank you to Ken Wiebe for joining us in hour number 1 and hour number 2, of course. And Scott Wheeler for joining us in hour number 2 to talk about Jets prospects. Great conversations with both of those fine gentlemen. Always enjoyable to get together with them. And it's been a fun Saturday morning with you guys as
It's been
well.
a nice little
Dave,
Saturday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our quality time tonight. I'm looking forward to a little bit of time off from Ezzy. That's always enjoyable as well. I'm sure Ezzy's going to enjoy a nice martini or old-fashioned or,
Oh, yeah, dry martini. That's me, Drew.
Most of the time, you're a beer guy, so it'd always be interesting when you're not.
I'm actually thinking Caesar tonight. I've been craving a Caesar.
Yeah. Craving a Caesar. Interesting. I'm sure that you'll have an enjoyable evening nonetheless with that. We remind everybody that we'll be back with the Illegal Curve post-game show later tonight, right around, let's say, 8:45 p.m., give or take a couple minutes there. Dave M. and I will wrap up everything that happened between the Jets and the Predators.
And preview the Moose game.
The Moose game, 9 o'clock. They're in Abbotsford again tonight, right, Dave M? Looking to bounce back.
bounced back from being pumped 8-2 last night. I mean, it was unbelievable. Nick Patan, 2013 second rounder of the Winnipeg Jets, scored a phenomenal between the legs goal that was pretty ridiculous. So I don't know if folks have seen that. You go on the Abbotsford Canucks Twitter account and check that out. It was a really
nice to
nice
see him
goal.
doing well, because it just didn't work out with him, unfortunately, with the Jets, right? Like all the skill in the world. So it's nice to see that he's still continuing his NHL career, because he's also.
But you know what?
Well, but he's not. I mean, he's clearly just he's an AHL player at this point. But with you can still make a fair living being an AHL player.
Yeah, and I think it was funny though, because I went and looked back, and I think I said on the show that was the worst, and it was the worst. That was the worst bludgeoning that the Moose had suffered all season long. In fact, the first game of the year they lost 5-1 to Toronto, and since then every game has been either a 1. Well, they've won obviously a lot more than they've lost, but even when they lose, they're fairly close games, and so that was
everyone has off nights, right? Like look at Drew. He has off nights all the time.
Yeah, and I think it'll be probably Mikhail Burden back in net, so we'll see. He's really for not looking good last year and not looking good to start this year, he's bounced back, and he's put together some solid efforts for this Manitoba Moose club, which is exactly what he needs to do. So that's a good sign for the Moose and potentially for the Jets later on. And then of course you've got all these young draft picks, like I said, who are going to hopefully get a chance to learn from that experience. And I'm sure the Moose coaching staff will have them ready to play. And, they're not going to use an excuse. They were supposed to get Jeff Malott back potentially. He's dealing with a lower body injury. He was, Mark Morrison had said before they left on the road that he may be able to join them on the road trip, which to me meant Abbotsford, but he obviously wasn't there last night. So that's a big piece of their scoring puzzle. They really don't have a ton of offense other than Mikey Eyssimont. I think he might be their only NHL contract right now on forward. So we'll have to see if Jeff Malott gets into the lineup tonight, and we'll see what kind of bounce back the Moose have.
And Dave M will have that covered for you, of course, during the post-game show, and then after that on illegalcurve.com. Want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. They make this show a possibility. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Bernstein's Deli, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Grid Park support these fine businesses because of their continued support of illegalcurve.com, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, and of course, the Illegal Curve post-game show. We thank everybody for joining us this Saturday morning. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell an enemy. Doesn't really matter. Tell everyone to come join us here Saturday mornings and after every Jets game for the Illegal Curve post-game show. We always appreciate the word of mouth support. For Mr. Ezra Ginsburg, for Mr. Dave Minuk, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Until later on tonight, we say thanks for watching. And if it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.